Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Aldas, and in this video I'm going to be looking at the confusing and complicated history of the F1 points system. Now, the Formula 1 points system has been an ever-evolving part of Formula 1 from the first ever season in 1950 up until the most recent season in 2019, and now with the sport going into its 70th anniversary, I thought it would be a great time to look back and see where did the F1 points system begin and how it's evolved into the point system that we have today. Now guys, don't forget, if you do enjoy the content on my channel, don't forget to drop a like and smash that subscribe button as well. That'll be massively appreciated. And don't forget to check out my social medias. Instagram and Twitter will be above. But guys, let's get into this one. Beginning in 1950, points were only handed out to the top 5 finishers, with the winner receiving a point plus another point for whoever set the fastest lap during the race. So it sounds pretty simple, yeah? Well, not exactly. You might want to buckle up for this one, guys, because it's about to get a whole load more complicated. In the early days, there were lots of little nuances and lots of little differences that distinguished it apart from the regular points system. Now, beginning in 1950, there was only a Drivers' Championship, as the Constructors' Championship had not yet been introduced. And on top of that, the F1 calendar also included the Indy 500, which was really bizarre because, for the most part, the F1 drivers did not take part in the Indy race, and the Indy drivers never raced on any other race on the F1 calendar. Oh, and on top of that, the Indy race didn't even have FIA spec cars that were the same for the entire calendar. Now, this makes for some really strange F1 statistics, like the all-time F1 win percentage, where, as you can see, two drivers, Lee Wallard and Bill Vukovic, slot right in between Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher, doing 3 and 6 races respectively, despite never racing on any other circuit other than the Indy 500. Happily though, the Indy 500 was later removed as an F1 World Championship race. There was also lots of differences between the points you scored in every race, and therefore throughout the entire season, and the points that actually went towards your championship. Now, this is because of something called the best results count rule, which basically meant that only your best results from a certain number of races counted towards the championship. So as an example, in 1950 there were 7 races on the calendar, however only your best result from 4 races out of the entire season would actually count towards the World Championship. One of the reasons for this rule was because the cars were ridiculously unreliable, as in, some drivers literally went an entire season without actually seeing the checkered flag. I mean, I'm not even joking. And therefore, the best results count rule slightly limited this problem, as it would exclude some of the races where drivers had DNFs from the championship. However, on top of that, points were also shared on some occasions between the drivers. Now, this is another nuance of racing from the 50s, because drivers were allowed to share their cars during a Grand Prix. For example, 2 or more drivers could drive in the same car for a race, switching during pit stops. On this occasion, if the car finished in the points, those points would be split between however many drivers drove that specific car. A famous example of this was at the 1956 title decider at Monza. During the race, Juan Manuel Fangio's Ferrari retired, meaning he could not win his 3rd world title. However, his teammate Peter Collins in a different Ferrari gave him his car during a pit stop. Fangio would finish the race in the other car in 2nd place, splitting the 2nd place points between the 2 teammates. But with those points from the 2nd car handed by Collins, Fangio now managed to score enough points to finish ahead of Sterling Moss in the championship to claim his 3rd world title. However, there was also an even more confusing way that points could be shared. One person could also drive in 2 different point-scoring cars, and what this means is that a driver could do a bit of the race in one car, have a driver swap, and then jump into another car, with both cars going on to finish in the points, and even with both cars going on to finish on the podium. Now, this happened at the 1955 Argentine Grand Prix, where drivers Nino Farina and Maurice Trintignant both finished in 2nd and joint 3rd. Alongside each other and their 3rd driver, as during various parts of the race, they both drove 2 different Ferrari cars, both of which finished on the podium. On these occasions, each driver would receive an equal share of the points for finishing in 2nd and an equal share of the points for finishing in joint 3rd as well, to give a kind of total amount of points that they scored for that race. Now, the confusion does not stop there because points were also shared between drivers when 2 or more drivers both set the same fastest lap during a race. Now, this was more of a problem during the 1950s because the timing technology wasn't exactly brilliant, as they only measured to the nearest tenth, which caused some seriously bizarre results, most famously during the 1954 British Grand Prix when 7 drivers set the same fastest lap in the race and each of them shared a 7th of a point, meaning it was an absolute nightmare when looking at the standings. From 1950 till 1953, the point system stayed the same, with the top 5 getting points from their best 4 races going towards the championship. This increased in 1954 due to the increase in calendar, as now your best 5 results counted towards the Drivers' Championship. It was in 1958, however, where major changes were made with the introduction of the Constructors' Championship, or as it was called back then, the International Cup for F1 manufacturers. There was also some special rules for the Constructors' Championship, such as the Indy 500 now did not count towards the Constructors, and only the points of the highest scoring driver for each team at each race were counted towards the Constructors' Championship. And also, the point for fastest lap did not contribute to the Constructors, it only contributed to the Drivers' Championship. On top of all of these big changes though, in 1958 the points system was streamlined a little bit to get rid of some of the confusion caused in the past. Points were no longer awarded for drivers who shared their cars during a race, which meant now from 1958 it was 1 driver, 1 car and 1 race, as it's been ever since. And also the last big change came in the increase from your 5 best results counting towards both the drivers and constructors to now your 6 best results counting towards both championships. Over the next few years, there would be more small changes made until a long period of stability, but 1960 was another year for more change. The point system was now extended, although it was still 8 points for the winner and then going down to 6, 4, 3 and then 2 for 5th place. The points were extended down to 6th place, for which the driver would get 1 solitary point. In addition, for the first time in F1 history, 1 point for fastest lap was now removed, and this would not make a comeback until 60 years later in the 2019 season. Moving on to 1961, we saw the last big change in the points system. The Indy 500 was finally removed from the F1 World Championship, and the winner would now get 9 points instead of 8. Although, really strangely, this did not increase for the Constructors' Championship, meaning that the driver who won the race got 9 points for the Drivers' Championship, but still only 8 points towards the Constructors' Championship, which was really strange, and even throughout all of my research, I couldn't quite find a reason as to why in 1961 the point system was like this. However, it was altered for the following year, as in 1962 the winning driver would get both 9 drivers and constructors points. However, in terms of the distribution of the points, the 9-6-4-3-2-1 system would now remain in Formula 1 for the next 30 years, making it the longest period of stability in the F1 point system history. Now, before we talk about the point system changes in 1991, we need to talk about everything that was wrong with the point system and why it was a bit of a mess, and how over time it caused so many problems for F1 in the early years. Now, the problem caused by all of these point intricacies and all of these little rules and details can basically be seen in the standings for the 1954 World Championship, where, I hope you're sitting down for this one, here they are. This is actually what it looked like. This is what it looks like on Wikipedia, and you can see both the real points in terms of what they were due to that point system on the left, and inside the bracket, what the total amount of points that each of the drivers actually scored outside of the point system for that year. And you can see it's an absolute mess. I mean, seriously. And the reason why it just looks like an absolute mess of numbers is down to 3 different things. Number 1, it was down to the best results count rule, which was an absolute nightmare for people back in the day, and I feel so sorry for the people that had to work all of this out. Number 2 was the fastest lap point and the timing problems and issues at the time, and number 3 was the sharing of the cars and the points. So first of all, let's talk about the best results count rule, which is an absolute just headache to even research for this video, let alone for the people having to use it back in the day. Now, this brought a lot of confusion and frustration, and in some cases actually gave a different champion than to the one that would have been crowned had it not been there. Although this rule did have good intentions to limit some of the damage that bad reliability could have on a season, it had a lot of faults as well. Although the points from 1961 to 1991 stayed the same, what did change almost year on year, which was really confusing, was the number of races that counted towards both the drivers and constructors championship. Now, this was mainly due to the ever-changing and also ever-increasing calendar because Formula 1 was just getting more and more popular, and it tried to get the best results from about 80% of the races from a season. In terms of how many races, however, this changed constantly from year to year, which is why it's so confusing looking back now. From 1963 to 1965, it was your best 6 results that counted towards your drivers and constructors, then going down to your best 5 results for 1966. And then, as if it wasn't already, it got even more complicated because from 1967 to 1978, the best results count rule was now split into 2 parts of the season. As an example, in 1967, your best 9 results out of the 11 races counted towards your total, as we've kind of been seeing before. However, now the season would be split down the middle, and it would be your best 5 results from the first 6 races of the season, and your best 4 results from the last 5 races of the season would be used to calculate your total points at the end of the season. Now, this continually changed year on year with regards to how many races from the first part of the season and how many races from the second part of the season, and this continued all the way up until 1979 with the best results count rule, using a certain number of races from the first part of the season and the second part of the season as well, with the number of races changing every single year depending on the calendar. So yeah, the best results count rule was an absolute nightmare. I mean, it's difficult enough trying to explain it to you guys, and I hope I did a decent-ish job. I hope you guys followed kind of through with that. But imagine what it was like for the fans back in those days. I mean, yeah, it's just a nightmare from start to finish, to be honest. But something else that was brought into Formula 1 was that if less than 75% of the race distance would be completed, then half points would be awarded to the grid. These instances usually occurred after a red flag situation, either after a race had been cancelled due to too much rain for the cars to continue racing, or if a race had to be cancelled because of an incident. Until 1991, the best results count rule again would see slight changes. In 1979, 8 races counted towards your total, 4 from the first 7 races and 4 from the last 8. But in 1979, it was made that every single round would now count towards the Constructors' Championship regardless of poor performances at certain races. And even more than that, from 1979, the results from both drivers now counted towards the Constructors' Championship, which meant that you could not just rely on one driver doing a really good job. Both had to absolutely deliver the maximum for the team, which meant that the quality and the standard of the drivers in a team would have to increase. The next year, again a slight change with the best results count rule would be made. However, the year after that, the split season difference in best results was dropped. Now, between 1981 to 1990, your best 11 races throughout the entire season counted towards the Drivers' Championship, whilst every single race now counted towards the Constructors' Championship, simplifying the championship and again getting a little bit closer to what we have in the modern day. The best results count rule, coupled with the splitting of the seasons, was not only a poor system, but also in some cases, it actually dulled the racing. For example, going into the final race of 1979, Alan Jones arrived for the final race of the season unable to improve on his maximum score for that portion of the season, as he had already taken 4 wins in the second half of the year, which basically meant that him being there had no effect on the championship for him, regardless of whether he won it or if he retired, which kind of defeats the drama and the tension and the excitement for the fans of seeing drivers race for points for the championship. However, perhaps the most famous example of where the best results count rule had a huge effect and literally altered the course of history in Formula 1 was the famous 1988 season between rivals and teammates Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost at McLaren. Now that year, Senna beat Prost 90 to 87 points for the championship. However, Prost, because of the best results count rule, had a huge 18 points taken away from him, whilst Ayrton Senna only had 4 points taken away from him. This meant that had the point system been normal without that rule, Prost would have been world champion that year and beaten his great rival at McLaren. And possibly, if the future stayed the same, Prost would have become a 5-time world champion, with Senna only being a 2-time world champion. And that's the thing, could you imagine how different our views would have been on these two legendary drivers if the point system did not favor Senna in 1988. So yeah, I mean, it's just a really frustrating rule that looking back had such a big impact on the history of Formula 1. However, finally, thank God we get to 1991, the year that the F1 point system finally started to look more and more like what we have today, and actually didn't require mind-burning arithmetic to work out how a driver was doing in the championship. In 1991, the points distribution was changed after 30 years. The winner would now get 10 points, followed by 6, 4, 3, 2, and 1 for finishing in 6th place. This was really big because as a percentage, finishing in first was now worth 66% more than finishing in second place. That's massive because even today with a fastest lap, finishing in first and scoring 26 points is only worth 45% more than finishing in second and scoring 18 points. This meant that now winning was more important than ever, and it really did encourage drivers to go for that win because it was now more important than it had ever been before, even up until this day. And also, the best news of all was that the best results count rule was now gone. It was banished to the pages of history, and from here on out, every single race and every single point that a driver scored now counted towards the drivers and constructors championship, meaning there was nowhere to hide for the drivers as they had to deliver in every single race, and reliability was more important than ever before. In 2003, the point system would once again be changed as a reaction to the ridiculous dominance of Michael Schumacher in 2002. Michael set a new record for the earliest a world championship had ever been decided by winning the title with 6 races to spare. The new point system was designed to stop this happening again, as it decreased the relative value of winning compared to second place. For 2003, the winner would still receive 10 points, but now points would be scored all the way down to 8th place, giving smaller teams a better chance to fight for points, with the new distribution being 10 for the winner, 8 points for second place, 6th for third, going down to 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. From here, the next major change came in 2010 when the point system was expanded once more to allow drivers down to 10th place to score a point, with the number of points given for each position getting a huge increase. The winner would get a massive 25 points, 18 for second and 15 for third, followed by 12, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, and 1 for the final point paying position. In the last 10 years, there's been little changes, although we have had little kind of small changes there and there. In 2014, we had a double points round for the final race of the season, which although didn't seem to go down well with the fans, I actually think that it did have a lot more potential than it perhaps put on. I think it was mostly down to the Merc dominance that didn't kind of give it the full potential, but I mean, imagine if you put the double points finale in Brazil 2008 with Lewis Hamilton trying to win the title against Felipe Massa, Brazil 2012 with Sebastian Vettel making that comeback after spinning very early on against Fernando Alonso, even Abu Dhabi 2016 between Hamilton and Rosberg, and even to an extent the 2019 finale we had in Abu Dhabi where Sainz, Albon and Gasly were fighting for best of the rest in the championship. So yeah, although in 2014 it might not have worked because of the Mercedes dominance, I do think that double points in the final race of the season does have some potential that perhaps should be explored in the future. And lastly, as I mentioned way earlier in the video, if you guys remember, the latest change we've had was that in 2019, 1 point for fastest lap was reintroduced, with a driver needing to finish in the top 10 to get that point. Now, the big increase in points over the years has really kind of skewed the statistics in favor of the modern drivers. For example, in terms of who has scored the most points in their entire F1 career, Lewis Hamilton heads the table on 3,431, with Sebastian Vettel in second on 2,985, with Fernando Alonso in third on 1,899. However, in terms of the total amount of races finished in the points, Michael Schumacher still heads that table on 221 races, with Lewis Hamilton and Kimi Raikkonen in joint second place on 213 races, and behind them is Fernando Alonso on 202. The F1 point system has seen many changes over the years, and although people love to complain that there is always something wrong or something unfair about it, I feel as if we are actually in a really good place with the point system at the moment, and it's amazing to see looking back where F1 started 70 years ago. Well guys, there you go, that is my video looking and exploring the history of the F1 points system. Now in the comments below, let me know what your favorite point system has been in the history of F1 and what changes you would make to the current one in the future to perhaps bring a little bit more excitement to Formula 1. Now, just before I do go, I just really quickly want to say that I recently did a collaboration with my friend Amadi over on the Kids Love F1 YouTube channel, and we talked about who's going to be in that Mercedes for 2021. It was a really fun video, so please go check it out. It will be in the link in the description below, and also drop him a subscribe as well and support the channel. He's a great content creator, so yeah, that would be greatly appreciated. Anyway guys, I hope you did enjoy this video, and if you did, don't forget to drop a like, smash that subscribe button, and check out my social medias. Instagram and Twitter will be above. And guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.